The distress signal came through at 0300 hours, screaming across every frequency the Galactic Council monitored. Commander Jake Morris was in the observation deck of Unity Point Station when the alarms started blaring. He grabbed his coffee and rushed to the command center where dozens of alien species were already gathering around the holographic display. The message played on repeat. A Lyran woman, her face covered in ash and blood, spoke frantically into the camera. Behind her, buildings burned. Children screamed. Explosions lit up the sky in orange and red. She was begging for help. The Krenth Dominion had arrived at Polara 4 with a full war fleet. They were bombing civilian centers. Millions were trapped. The planetary defense grid was destroyed in the first hour. Jake watched the faces of the council representatives. The Tarsians looked concerned. The Velans were making soft clicking sounds of distress. The Gorth representative was already pulling up diplomatic channels. Everyone seemed upset, but nobody was doing anything. "We need to respond immediately," Jake said, stepping forward. His human voice cut through the softer tones of the other species. Several aliens turned to look at him with their large, gentle eyes. The Tarsian council leader, a tall being with blue skin and 4 arms, raised one hand peacefully. "Of course, Commander Morris. We will convene an emergency session within the hour. All proper protocols will be followed." "An hour?" Jake felt his jaw clench. "People are dying right now. We understand your distress," the Tarsian said gently. "But we must follow established procedures. The Council has maintained peace for 3,000 years through careful deliberation and diplomatic response." Jake looked back at the screen. The Lyran woman was gone now. The feed showed only static and occasional glimpses of destruction. He thought about his own daughter back on Earth, safe in school. He tried to imagine her in that burning city, waiting for help that would come too late. The council session began 2 hours later. Jake sat in the human observer section, which was still new and small. Earth had only joined the Galactic Council 8 months ago. They were still learning how things worked out here among the stars. What Jake learned that day made him sick. The council talked. They talked about trade sanctions. They talked about strongly worded messages. They talked about forming committees to investigate the situation. They talked about sending diplomatic envoys to negotiate with the Krenth. They talked for 6 hours straight while the distress signals from Polara the 4 grew weaker and less frequent. Captain Lisa Grant arrived at Unity Point during hour 4 of the debate. She commanded the Defiant, one of 3 human vessels currently assigned to Council space. She was a career military officer, 42 years old with short brown hair and eyes that had seen combat before Earth even knew aliens existed. She found Jake in the hallway outside the council chamber. "Tell me they're sending a fleet." Jake just shook his head. Lisa's expression went cold. "How long have they been talking?" 4 hours. Probably another 4 to go, minimum. That planet has 8 million civilians on it. I know. Lisa stood there for a moment, her hands clenched into fists. Then she pulled out her communication device and walked away, speaking quietly into it. Jake watched her go. He had a pretty good idea who she was calling. By hour 12, the council had decided on their response. They would send a diplomatic mission to the Krenth homeworld. They would impose economic sanctions. They would write a formal protest. They estimated the diplomatic team could arrive at Krenth space within a week. The distress signals from Polara 4 had stopped 3 hours ago. Jake left the chamber and went back to the observation deck. Earth was visible from here, a blue and white marble hanging in the black. He stared at it for a long time, thinking about what made humanity different from all these other species. Earth was a death world. That was the term the other aliens used, though they tried to be polite about it. Most species in the galaxy came from gentle planets with light gravity and no major predators. They evolved in peace and carried that peace into the stars. Humans evolved on a world that tried to kill them every single day. Predators, diseases, weather, other humans. Earth created a species that knew how to fight, because fighting was the only way to survive. And when humans finally reached the stars, they brought that knowledge with them. Lisa found him an hour later. "It's done," she said quietly. "Admiral Cole is bringing the fleet." Jake turned to look at her. "The council didn't authorize that." "I know. They'll be furious. Let them be furious." Lisa's voice was hard as steel. "I didn't join the military to watch children burn while politicians talk. Over the next 6 hours, Human ships began arriving at Unity Point. The destroyer Relentless came first, with Commander Jake Morris officially transferred to her as tactical officer. Then came the cruiser Stalwart, the carrier Vigilance with Admiral Henry Cole aboard, and 12 more vessels of various sizes. The alien species at Unity Point watched in amazement as the human fleet organized itself with military precision. They had never seen anything like it. Most Council species had small defense forces for pirates and accidents. But humanity had built ships designed for war. Admiral Cole was 60 years old with gray hair and a face carved from stone. He had fought in 3 different conflicts on Earth before humanity reached the stars. He understood something that the peaceful aliens did not. Sometimes the only way to stop evil was to punch it in the face. He stood on the bridge of the Vigilance and looked at the gathered captains on his screen. Lisa was there, along with Danny Wright, who commanded a fighter squadron, Kate Stevens, who ran weapons systems on the cruiser Guardian, and a dozen others. "You all know what we're doing," Cole said. "We're going to Polara 4. We're going to break that blockade. We're going to save whoever's left to save. We don't have Council authorization. We're probably going to start a diplomatic incident. Anyone who wants to back out, now's your chance." Nobody moved. "Good," Cole said. "Let's go remind the galaxy why you don't mess with Deathworlders." The human fleet jumped to faster-than-light speed, leaving Unity Point behind. The Galactic Council watched them go in stunned silence. The Tarsian leader turned to his advisors with something like fear in his eyes. "What have we allowed into our council?" he whispered. But Jake, watching from the Relentless as stars streaked past the viewport, knew the truth. The council had not allowed anything. Humanity had simply shown them what they really were. Earth's children had heard someone crying for help in the dark, and they were coming. The human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Polara system in perfect formation. 15 warships spread out in a pattern that would have taken most Council fleets hours to organize, locked into position in under 3 minutes. Admiral Cole stood on the bridge of the Vigilance looking at the tactical display. The Krenth blockade fleet was exactly where intelligence said it would be, orbiting Polara 4 like vultures around a dying animal. 23 ships. Most of them were cruiser class or larger. The humans were outnumbered, outgunned, and completely undeterred. "All ships battle stations," Cole ordered. His voice was calm, like he was ordering coffee instead of heading into combat. "Weapons free on my mark." On the Defiant, Captain Lisa Grant checked her crew's readiness. Every station reported green. Her weapons officer was a young man named Peter Cross, 24 years old and eager to prove himself. Her navigator was Amy Price, who had requested transfer from Marines to bridge crew just 2 months ago. "Captain," Peter said, his voice tight with nerves. "The Krenth are hailing us when I put them on screen." The Krenth commander appeared on the view screen. He was massive, probably 7 feet tall, with scales and teeth that marked his species as evolved predators. His kind had conquered 6 star systems through military force. He looked at Lisa with what might have been amusement. "Human vessel. You are interfering in Krenth military operations. Leave now or be destroyed." Lisa smiled, and it was not a nice smile. "Negative. You have 60 seconds to break orbit and leave this system. After that, we're coming through you." The Krenth commander laughed. It was a harsh barking sound. "You are 15 ships against our 23. You are small, soft creatures from a backwater world. We are the apex predators of our system. We have never lost a battle." 60 seconds, Lisa repeated and cut the communication. The Krenth did not leave. They moved into attack formation, confident and unconcerned. They had fought Council species before, gentle beings who barely understood violence, who could be frightened with a show of force. They expected the humans to be the same. They were very wrong. "All ships," Admiral Cole said quietly. "Execute attack pattern Sierra 7. Let's show them how Deathworlders fight." The human fleet accelerated. Not the careful, measured approach that Council ships used, but a full burn that pushed engines to their limits. The Krenth had 5 seconds to realize something was different before the humans were on them. The battle that followed would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for generations. Commander Jake Morris sat at the tactical station on the Relentless, coordinating weapons fire with a precision that seemed impossible. He was calling out targets, timing, distances, all while the ship twisted and turned through space at speeds that would have killed most alien species from the G-forces alone. Humans could take it. Humans evolved on a world where falling down could kill you, where your body had to be tough just to survive childhood. They built their ships the same way, and they flew them like they were parts of their own bodies. Danny Wright led Red Squadron, 12 fighters that launched from the Vigilance like angry hornets. He was 31, cocky, and one of the best pilots humanity had ever produced. His fighter screamed through the space between capital ships, dodging weapons fire that should have vaporized him. Red 3, hit that cruiser's port engine, he ordered. Red 7, Red 9, follow me. We're going for the carrier. The Krenth fighters tried to intercept them. They were good, skilled pilots who had trained for years. But they had never fought someone like Danny Wright. He flew through debris fields, pulled maneuvers that used the wreckage of destroyed ships as cover, and seemed to predict enemy movements before they happened. That was another thing humans brought from Earth. Persistence hunting. The ability to track prey, to think ahead, to know where something was going before it got there. Translated into space combat, it made human pilots terrifying. On the Guardian, Commander Kate Stevens ran the weapons systems with cold efficiency. She was 38, had served 20 years in various Earth militaries, and had a gift for mathematics that let her calculate firing solutions in her head faster than some computers. Target their bridge, she said calmly, watching the screens. Fire in 3, 2, 1 mark. The Guardian's main cannon spoke. A Krenth destroyer disappeared in a ball of fire. The Krenth were realizing too late that they were not fighting a council species. These were not gentle beings who could be intimidated. These were predators from a world that had tried to kill them for millions of years. These were humans, and humans knew how to hunt. The Krenth commander tried to rally his fleet, but human tactics were like nothing he had trained for. The council species fought defensively, trying to minimize casualties. Humans fought to win. They took risks that seemed suicidal. They coordinated their attacks with split-second timing. They turned every rule of civilized warfare on its head. When one Krenth cruiser damaged the Relentless, knocking out her weapons and engines, Jake Morris made a decision that shocked everyone watching. He ordered the crew to abandon ship in escape pods, then manually piloted the dying vessel straight into the Krenth cruiser's side. The impact destroyed both ships. Jake ejected at the last second in an emergency pod, tumbling through space while rescue ships scrambled to pick him up. It was insane. It was desperate. It worked. The Krenth line broke. 6 hours after the battle started, the blockade was shattered. 11 Krenth ships were destroyed. The remaining 12 were fleeing the system, running for their lives from an enemy they finally understood was more dangerous than they had imagined. The human fleet had losses too. The Relentless was gone. 2 other destroyers were heavily damaged. 347 crew members were dead or wounded. But they had won. Admiral Cole looked at the planet below, where fires still burned across the surface. All ships capable of atmospheric entry, prepare landing parties. Guardian Stalwart, maintain orbit and watch for Krenth return. Everyone else, let's go get those people out. Amy Price was back in her marine armor now, leading a squad of 30 soldiers down to Polara 4's surface. They landed in the capital city, where buildings lay in ruins and civilians huddled in shelters. The Lyrans who emerged were not what Amy expected. They were tall, thin creatures with pale skin and large eyes. They looked fragile. They looked terrified. And they looked at the humans like they were seeing monsters. Maybe they were monsters, Amy thought. Her armor was scorched from weapons fire. Her rifle had Krenth blood on it. Her squad moved through the ruins like the warriors they were. But then a Lyran child, no more than 5 years old by human standards, ran out from a collapsed building. She was crying alone, covered in dust. Behind her, Amy could hear Krenth ground troops still active in the city. Amy holstered her rifle and knelt down. She made her voice as gentle as she could. "Hey there, little one. It's okay. We're here to help." The child looked at her with huge, frightened eyes. Amy pulled off her helmet so the kid could see her face. She smiled. The child hesitated, then ran into her arms. "I've got you," Amy whispered, holding the small alien body close. "You're safe now." Behind her, her squad moved to secure the area. They found 17 more civilians in the next hour, carrying them to safety while fighting off Krenth soldiers who were not ready to surrender. All across the planet, the same scene played out. Human soldiers trained for war, showing mercy to civilians. Pilots like Danny Wright, who had just destroyed enemy ships, now flew evacuation runs, cramming their fighters with refugees. Officers like Kate Stevens, who had calculated death with cold precision, now calculated the best routes to get people away from danger. By the time the sun rose over Polara 4, 6 million Lyrans had been evacuated to safety. 2 million were dead, killed before the humans arrived. The ones who survived would never forget the sight of human soldiers standing between them and death, protecting them with the same ferocity they had used to destroy the blockade. The Galactic Council watched all of this in silence. They had seen humanity fight. They had seen humanity win, and they did not know whether to be grateful or terrified. Ambassador Victoria Lane stood in the center of the Galactic Council chamber and felt the weight of thousands of alien eyes on her. She was 56 years old, had spent 30 years in Earth's diplomatic corps, and had never felt this alone. The chamber was enormous, a circular room with seats rising up on all sides like an ancient amphitheater. Representatives from 43 different species sat in judgment. Above her head, screens showed footage from Polara 4, the burning cities, the human fleet arriving, the battle, the rescue. The Tarsian Council leader spoke first. His voice echoed through the chamber, translated into dozens of languages. Ambassador Lane, humanity has committed an act of war without Council authorization. You violated our protocols. You ignored our diplomatic channels. You brought violence to a situation that we were resolving peacefully. Victoria took a breath. Stay calm, she told herself. With respect, Council leader, you were not resolving anything. You were talking while people died. A murmur went through the chamber. Several species made sounds of disapproval. The Velen representative stood, her wings fluttering in agitation. We were following proper procedure. The Council has maintained peace for 3,000 years through careful diplomacy. And in those 3,000 years, Victoria said, how many times has someone like the Krenth Dominion done exactly what they did at Polara 4? How many colonies have burned while you debated? That is not relevant, the Tarsian said firmly. We have rules. We have laws. Without them, we descend into chaos. Victoria pulled up a remote control and activated the screens herself. The council chamber filled with images. A Lyran mother holding her dead child. A father digging through rubble with his bare hands. A school that had been bombed, small bodies in the wreckage. These people cared about your rules, Victoria said, her voice hard. I'm sure it was very comforting to them while they burned alive. You cannot justify military aggression with emotional appeals, the Gorath representative said. Violence begets violence. By attacking the Krenth, you have escalated the situation. We saved 8 million lives. You killed thousands of Krenth soldiers. Soldiers who were bombing civilians, Victoria shot back. Tell me, what would you have done, really? If it was your families down there, your children, would you have been satisfied with strongly worded sanctions? The chamber fell silent. Victoria could see the discomfort on their faces. These were species that had evolved on gentle worlds, who had never known the kind of predatory violence that Earth produced. They had built a civilization on peace because peace was all they knew. The Tarsian leader spoke again, his voice softer. Ambassador Lane, we understand that humanity comes from a more difficult environment. But you must understand our perspective. For 3,000 years, we have proven that civilized beings do not need war. We have shown that problems can be solved through dialogue and cooperation. And when dialogue fails? Victoria asked. When you're facing someone who only understands violence, someone who sees your diplomacy as weakness, what then? Then we continue to try, the Velen said. Because the alternative is to become like them, to embrace barbarism. Victoria felt her anger rising. She wanted to shout at them to make them understand. But then she saw movement in the gallery. The Lyran delegation was standing up. Ambassador Krell was old by Lyran standards, probably close to 90. He walked with a cane, moving slowly to the speaking platform. The council leader yielded to him out of respect. Krell looked around the chamber with tired eyes. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, but everyone listened. I have served on this council for 40 years. I have believed in our peaceful ways. I have argued for diplomacy, for patience, for understanding. He paused, leaning heavily on his cane. 3 days ago, the Krenth came to my world. They bombed my city. They killed my son. They killed my daughter-in-law. They very nearly killed my granddaughter. The chamber was completely silent now. I watched from an evacuation shelter as the sky burned. Krell continued. I listened to the screams. I held my granddaughter while she cried for her parents who were never coming back. And I waited for the council to save us. He looked directly at the Tarsian leader. You did not come. You talked. You debated. You followed your procedures while my people died. He pulled up his own screen, showing footage from Polara 4. But this footage was different. It showed human Marines landing under fire. It showed Amy Price carrying Lyran children to safety. It showed Danny Wright's fighter taking hits meant for evacuation ships. It showed Jake Morris's ship ramming a Krenth cruiser to save the planet below. These humans came, Krell said simply. They did not ask for permission. They did not wait for authorization. They heard us screaming and they came. They fought for us. They bled for us. They died for us. His voice broke slightly. A human soldier named Peter Cross threw himself on a grenade to save my granddaughter and 4 other Lyran children. He was 24 years old. He will never go home to Earth. He is buried on my world now, and we will honor his grave forever. Krell turned to face Victoria. This council asks what humanity has done. I will tell you what they have done. They have shown us that all your talk of peace means nothing if you are not willing to fight for it. They have shown us that sometimes the most moral choice is to punch evil in the face before it hurts anyone else. He looked back at the council. If you punish Earth for this, if you sanction them or expel them, then you are telling every victim in this galaxy that they do not matter. That following procedures is more important than saving lives. And if that is true, then this council is already dead. Krell sat down slowly. The chamber remained silent for a long moment. Then the Gorath representative stood up and walked out. Several others followed. They could not accept what had happened. To them, humanity's actions were barbaric, uncivilized, a step backward into darkness, but others remained. The Lyrans, obviously, but also the Tarsians, though the council leader looked troubled. The Velans stayed, whispering among themselves. About half the council remained in their seats. The vote took 3 hours. Sanctions against Earth for unauthorized military action. The motion failed by a narrow margin. Formal censure also failed. Expulsion from the council failed by a wider margin, with the Lyrans threatening to leave if it passed. In the end, the council issued a statement of concern and established a committee to review protocols for emergency situations. It was the most nothing response they could have given, and everyone knew it. Victoria left the chamber feeling hollow. She had not lost, but she had not really won either. The galaxy was divided now, split between those who saw humanity as heroes and those who saw them as dangerous primitives. She found Jake Morris waiting outside. He had been pulled from the Relentless's wreckage with 2 broken ribs and a concussion. He was supposed to be in medical, but he had come anyway. How bad? He asked. Could have been worse, Victoria said. We're still in the council. Barely. And the Krenth? That's the problem. Victoria pulled up her datapad, showing him intelligence reports. They're mobilizing. Our attack humiliated them. They're calling for revenge. Jake looked at the reports and felt ice in his stomach. The Krenth had a fleet 3 times larger than what they had sent to Polara 4. And all of it was now pointing at human space. We wanted to save people, he said quietly. We just wanted to help. I know, Victoria said. But we live in a complicated galaxy, and sometimes doing the right thing has consequences we never expected. Back on Earth, Admiral Cole was briefing the military command. The message was simple and terrifying. The Krenth were coming. Not to some distant colony world. Not to alien space. They were coming for Earth itself. Humanity had won its first battle among the stars, but they had also started their first interstellar war. And now they would learn the price of being the galaxy's warriors. The Deathworlders had answered the call for help. Now they would face the consequences of their choice. The Krenth struck at dawn. New Haven was a small colony, only 20,000 people on the edge of human space. It was a farming world, peaceful, with families who had moved there to escape the crowded cities of Earth. They had fields of wheat under an orange sky, children who played in streams, and a future that seemed bright. That future ended in fire. The Krenth fleet came out of nowhere, jumping into orbit before the defense satellites could even send a warning. 6 warships, each one massive, began bombing the surface. They targeted the spaceport first, then the power stations, then the residential areas. They were not trying to conquer New Haven. They were trying to destroy it. Governor Linda Shaw died in the first 5 minutes, her office vaporized by orbital bombardment. The colony's tiny defense force, 3 patrol ships, lasted 8 minutes before they were reduced to debris. On the ground, people ran for the shelters, but the Krenth knew where those were. They had planned this carefully. 16,000 people died in the first hour. The remaining 4,000 were trapped in the ruins, waiting for death. 2 other colonies were hit simultaneously. Port Darwin with 30,000 residents, New Shanghai with 45,000. The attacks were coordinated, brutal, and designed to send a message that humanity could not ignore. When the last transmission from New Haven cut out, there was one more thing. A recorded message from the Krenth High Commander, broadcast on every human frequency. His words were simple and cold. You interfered in Krenth business. You humiliated our fleet. Now you will learn the price of challenging us. We will burn your worlds one by one until Earth itself is ash. The response from Earth was immediate. Admiral Cole stood in the war room at Fleet Command, looking at the holographic displays. Every available ship was being recalled. Every reserve unit was being activated. He had lost 3 colonies and over 90,000 civilians, and now he had authorization to do what he had been trained for his entire life. He was going to take the fight to the enemy. We hit them hard, he said to the assembled officers. We hit them fast. We make them regret they ever heard the word human. Captain Lisa Grant was there, her face grim. Jake Morris stood beside her, still healing from his injuries but refusing to stay behind. Danny Wright had his flight suit on already, eager to get back in a cockpit. Kate Stevens was reviewing target data, her expression cold as ice. What are our rules of engagement? Lisa asked. We're going into Krenth space, Cole said. Military targets only, but we do not hold back. They want a war. We'll give them one they'll never forget. The human fleet assembled over the next 48 hours. 23 warships, every one of them crewed by people who had seen the footage from New Haven. People who were angry. People who wanted revenge. Jake Morris knew that anger was dangerous. He had seen it before in Earth's history, how righteous fury could turn into something ugly. But he also knew that sometimes, anger was the only appropriate response to evil. The fleet jumped into Krenth space 3 days after the attacks. They did not announce themselves. They did not ask for negotiations. They simply appeared at the Krenth supply station at Vorath and began firing. What followed was not like Polara Thor. This was not a desperate rescue mission where humanity fought to save civilians. This was war, pure and simple, and humans were very good at it. Commander Kate Stevens ran the weapon systems on the Guardian, targeting the station's defensive platforms with mathematical precision. Each shot was calculated to cause maximum damage. Within 20 minutes, the station's defenses were gone. Ground troops. You are clear for boarding, she said calmly. Amy Price led the assault teams, her armor's servos whining as she moved through the station's corridors. She had a prosthetic leg now, a replacement for the one she lost on Polarov, but it did not slow her down. Her squad moved like they were one organism, covering each other, clearing rooms, taking control of the station section by section. The Krenth soldiers fought back hard. They were bigger than humans, stronger with natural weapons that could tear through armor, but they were used to fighting council species, who tried to minimize casualties, who hesitated before killing. Humans did not hesitate. Amy shot a Krenth soldier who was reaching for a weapon, moved to the next target, kept moving. Her squad followed her lead. They had seen what the Krenth did to New Haven. They were not feeling merciful. In orbit, Danny Wright led strike missions against Krenth supply ships. His fighters were faster, more agile, and piloted by people who had been flying combat missions since humanity learned to build aircraft. The Krenth had numbers, but humans had skill that came from thousands of years of warfare on a world that rewarded the best killers. Jake Morris was on the Relentless II, a new ship named after the one he had sacrificed at Polara IV. He ran tactical operations, coordinating between different units, finding weaknesses in enemy formations. He had studied military history his entire life, from ancient Earth battles to modern space combat. He knew tricks and strategies that the Krenth had never seen. Target their logistics, he told Admiral Cole. They have a big fleet, but they need supplies, fuel, ammunition, food. Cut off their supply lines and they'll starve. Cole approved the strategy. Human forces began hitting Krenth supply convoys, fuel depots, and manufacturing centers. They did not go after civilian targets, but they did not need to. By cutting off the military supplies, they were crippling the entire Krenth war machine. The Krenth tried to respond. They sent their own fleets to engage the humans. But every time they tried to bring their superior numbers to bear, the human fleet would scatter, break into small groups, attack from unexpected angles, then disappear before the Krenth could coordinate a response. It was guerrilla warfare on an interstellar scale, and it was working. Within 2 months, 3 Krenth fortress systems had fallen. Their supply lines were in chaos. Their fleet was scattered across a dozen systems, trying to protect everything and failing to protect anything. But the cost was terrible. The carrier Vigilance was destroyed in a battle over the Krenth mining world of Torath. Admiral Cole survived, barely, ejecting in an escape pod moments before the ship exploded. 200 crew members were not so lucky. The destroyer Phoenix was lost with all hands when it covered the retreat of damaged vessels, staying behind to fight off Krenth pursuers. 147 people died, and their names would be read at memorials across human space. Amy Price led a ground assault on a Krenth command station that succeeded but cost her half her squad. She sat in the medical bay afterward, looking at the empty beds where her soldiers should have been, and wondered if revenge was worth the price. Danny Wright's squadron was down to 6 fighters from the original 12. He knew every pilot who had died, had trained with them, had shared drinks with them in the crew lounge. Every sortie felt like flying through a graveyard. Jake Morris reviewed casualty reports every night and felt the weight of every name. 4,000 human military personnel dead, thousands more wounded. And for what? To punish the Krenth? To avenge New Haven? How many deaths would be enough? Captain Lisa Grant stood on the bridge of the Defiant, looking at a tactical map of Krenth space. They had won every major engagement. The Krenth fleet was retreating, but her ship bore scars from a dozen battles and her crew was exhausted. "Captain," her communications officer said quietly, "we're receiving a message from Earth. Admiral Cole is requesting all senior officers for a conference call." Lisa brought it up on her screen. Cole looked older, tired, with bandages visible under his uniform. The other officers looked the same. They had all been fighting for 2 months straight, and they were all wondering the same thing. "The Krenth have requested a ceasefire," Cole said without preamble. "They're asking for negotiations." Lisa felt something twist in her stomach. Part of her wanted to keep fighting, to make the Krenth pay for every life lost at New Haven. But another part, the part that was tired of death, wanted it to end. "What are your orders, Admiral?" she asked. Cole was quiet for a moment. "We've hurt them badly. Their military is crippled. But we've paid a heavy price too. If we keep pushing, we might destroy them completely. But we'll lose more of our own people doing it." He looked at the camera, and Lisa could see the weight of command in his eyes. "I'm asking for your opinions. All of you. What do we do?" The question hung in the air, heavy and terrible. It was the question that every warrior eventually faced. When does justice become revenge? When should the killing stop? And none of them had a good answer. The war had been going on for 6 months when Sergeant Kyle Barnes found the children. His patrol was sweeping through the ruins of a bombed-out city on Terran III, a contested border world where human and Krenth forces had been fighting for 3 weeks. The city was supposed to be empty, evacuated before the fighting started. But intelligence was wrong, like it often was in war. Kyle heard the crying first. Small voices, frightened, coming from a collapsed building. His squad moved carefully, weapons ready, expecting a trap. Instead, they found 12 Krenth civilians huddled in a basement. Most of them were children. Kyle had killed Krenth soldiers for 6 months. He had learned to see them as the enemy, as the ones who burned New Haven, who killed 16,000 civilians, including children not so different from these. And now he stood looking at a Krenth child, maybe 5 years old, who looked up at him with the same fear he had seen in human children's eyes. "What do we do, Sarge?" Private Ben Cole asked. He was 19, fresh from training, and his rifle was pointed at the civilians. Kyle thought about the rules of engagement. Civilians were non-combatants. They were not targets. But these were Krenth civilians, and they were in a war zone. The smart military decision was to detain them, call it in, let command figure it out. But Kyle looked at that child's face and saw his own daughter back on Earth. He saw humanity's supposed difference from the Krenth, the thing that made them better. He made a choice. "We get them out of here," he said. "There's a civilian evacuation zone 5 clicks south. We take them there." "They're the enemy," Ben said, uncertain. "They're kids," Kyle replied. "We don't kill kids. That's what makes us different." His squad escorted the civilians through 6 kilometers of dangerous territory, giving them water from their own supplies. sharing their rations. When they reached the evacuation zone, Kyle handed over the children to relief workers. One of the Krenth children, the small one who had been crying, touched Kyle's hand before leaving. The touch was gentle, trusting. Kyle's squad did not talk about it. They went back to their patrol, back to the war. But someone had recorded the whole thing on combat cameras. Within 24 hours, the footage was everywhere. It showed human soldiers, the same ones who had been fighting Krenth forces for months, protecting Krenth children. It showed Kyle giving water to a wounded Krenth mother. It showed his squad, weapons lowered, treating the enemy with mercy. The footage reached both human and Krenth networks. And it started changing things. On Earth, people who had been calling for total destruction of the Krenth began to question what they really wanted. These were not faceless monsters. They were people who bled, who cried, who had children that looked scared in exactly the same way human children did. In Krenth space, the footage caused something close to panic. Their propaganda had painted humans as savage beasts, Deathworlders who knew only violence. But here were those same humans protecting Krenth civilians, treating them with a gentleness that contradicted everything their leaders had said. Captain Lisa Grant saw the footage in her quarters aboard the Defiant. She sat there for a long time, thinking about what she had become over the past 6 months. She had killed Krenth soldiers. Many of them. She had made decisions that resulted in deaths, some civilian casualties despite her best efforts. She had become a warrior, hardened by combat. But she had not become a monster. That was important. That was everything. 2 days after Kyle's footage spread across the galaxy, Lisa received an unexpected communication. It was from a Krenth commander named Vresh, one of their senior military officers. He was requesting a meeting under Neutral Council mediation. Lisa brought it to Admiral Cole. "It could be a trap," she said. Cole, still recovering from his injuries, looked at the request carefully. "It could be, but it's also an opportunity. We've hurt them badly, Lisa. They're ready to talk. The question is, are we ready to listen?" The meeting took place on a Neutral Council station, with representatives from 3 different species present as witnesses. Lisa came with Jake Morris as her tactical advisor. Vresh came with his own officers. The Krenth commander was huge, easily 7 feet tall with scales that bore scars from multiple battles. He looked at Lisa with eyes that held both respect and hatred. "You destroyed my brother's ship at Polara 4, he said without preamble. "And your people killed 16,000 civilians at New Haven," Lisa replied, her voice hard. "Including children who had nothing to do with this war." "War is not clean," Vresh said. "You humans should know this better than anyone. Your history is filled with violence." "Yes," Lisa agreed. "We know war. We know it very well. That's why we want it to end." They sat across from each other, 2 warriors who had spent months trying to kill each other, and for the first time really talked, not as propaganda machines or military objectives, but as people who were tired of watching their soldiers die. "Your people call you Deathworlders," Vresh said. "They say you come from a world of endless violence. Yet I saw the footage of your soldiers protecting Krenth children. Explain this contradiction." Jake spoke up. "We fight hard because our world taught us how to survive. But that same world taught us to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Strength without mercy is just cruelty. We learned that the hard way." "The Krenth value strength," Vresh said. "We have built an empire on military power. To show mercy is to show weakness in that, and how's that working out for you?" Lisa asked bluntly. "You've lost 1/3 of your fleet. Your supply lines are destroyed. Your people are questioning why they're fighting. All because you equated strength with violence." The negotiations took 3 days. They were brutal, honest, and painful for both sides. The Krenth agreed to withdraw from all contested territories, to pay reparations to the colonies they had attacked, and to submit to council oversight of their military expansion. In return, humanity agreed to cease all offensive operations and to help rebuild some of the Krenth infrastructure they had destroyed. Neither side was happy with the terms. That usually meant it was a good compromise. Victoria Lane, Earth's ambassador, worked with the Galactic Council to establish something new. They called it the Guardian Initiative, a rapid response force that could act when diplomatic solutions failed. It would be led jointly by humans and several other species who had learned from the war that sometimes peace required the willingness to defend it. The council itself underwent reforms. They established clearer protocols for emergency situations, ones that did not require 12 hours of debate while people died. They created a military advisory board, something they had never needed before. They began to understand that their 3,000 years of peace had only been possible because no one had seriously challenged them until now. Commander Jake Morris returned to New Haven 6 months after the war ended. The colony was being rebuilt slowly. 16,000 graves covered a hillside, marked with simple stones. He walked among them, reading names, and felt the weight of every choice he had made. A man approached him, one of the survivors. "You're one of the officers who was at Palara before," the man said. "Yes," Jake replied. "My sister died here. In the attacks." The man was quiet for a moment. "But I saw the footage from Terran III, the sergeant who saved those Krenth children. That's what we're supposed to be, isn't it? Not conquerors or destroyers. Protectors." Jake nodded, unable to speak. Danny Wright was training alien pilots now, teaching them human combat techniques. He was 20% more careful than he used to be, having learned that flashy flying got people killed. His squadron had a memorial wall with 12 names on it, pilots who would never fly again. He touched that wall before every training session, remembering Amy Price commanded the Guardian Initiative's ground forces, working with soldiers from 6 different species. She taught them human tactics but also human philosophy. "We fight not because we love war," she would say, "but because we love what we're protecting more than we fear the cost." Captain Lisa Grant stood on the bridge of the Peacekeeper, humanity's newest contribution to the Guardian fleet. Around her, screens showed ships from a dozen different species, all of them learning to work together, all of them training for conflicts they hoped would never come. She thought about the journey that had brought her here. From Unity Point, where she had watched the council debate while people died, through Palara 4, where humanity had shown the galaxy what Deathworlders could do, through the war with the Krenth, where they had learned the terrible cost of violence, to here where they were building something better. The galaxy had learned something important. Humanity had shown them that strength was not the same as cruelty, that the ability to destroy did not mean you should, that the best warriors were the ones who understood the price of war. Earth's children had heard a cry for help in the dark. They had answered with fire and fury, with courage and blood. They had shown the galaxy what it meant to be protectors, not conquerors. And now when the next distress call came, when the next helpless people cried out for salvation, they would not be alone. The Guardian Initiative would answer. The Deathworlders and their allies standing together would come, not because they loved violence, but because some things were worth fighting for. Peace, justice, the innocent who could not protect themselves.